Right, so let's jump right into it. Today, we are going to be tackling, a pretty big question that I think is on the mind of anyone who's, building modern applications, especially when we're talking about choosing the right proxy server.
Right.
And specifically, we're going to be looking at Envoy Proxy versus NGINX.
Yeah.
And I think picking the wrong one can really have a huge impact on your application's performance, security, and especially as we move more and more into this world of cloud-native applications, microservices, all that good stuff.
Yeah, no, and I think, when it comes to this comparison, what's really fascinating is that both NGINX and Envoy are both incredibly powerful in their own right.
Right.
But their strengths really lie in different areas. And so we're going to kind of uncover those differences so you can walk away knowing exactly which one fits your needs.
I like it. I'm already intrigued.
Yeah.
So let's rewind a little bit just to give folks some context. NGINX has been around for a while, right?
Oh, yeah.
I feel like I hear about it all the time.
Absolutely.
What's the story there?
Yeah, so NGINX has a very solid history, right? So it started out as this super efficient web server.
Okay.
And then it evolved into, really this workhorse reverse proxy and load balancer. And so you'll find it, literally everywhere, powering both traditional web apps and, and some modern ones as well.
Okay, so it's got that tried and true kind of reputation.
Right.
But what about Envoy Proxy? This seems newer on the scene to me, at least.
Yeah, so Envoy is definitely the newer kid on the block, relatively speaking.
Okay.
But its background is actually really interesting. It was born within Lyft, and it was designed specifically for the demands of modern architectures, like microservices.
Oh, wow.
Which is why you'll see it as a core component
Yeah.
in a lot of these popular service meshes like Istio and Consul.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. So I'm already starting to see how, their origin stories are shaping their strengths.
Yeah.
We've got NGINX with these roots in, traditional web serving, and then Envoy, which is really built for that fast-paced, distributed world of microservices.
Yeah.
And this makes me think about, a specific problem that I'm wrestling with.
Okay.
So my team is building a new application, and we're trying to decide between these two for, how we handle traffic. How does their underlying architecture actually impact how we would use them?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's actually a very common one. Let's kind of get into the nuts and bolts a bit here. So NGINX, at its core, is optimized for efficiency, especially with more traditional web traffic patterns.
Okay.
Think about serving static content like images or web pages, really, really fast.
Okay, so that makes sense given its history as a web server, right?
Right.
So if we're building something with lots of static content, more predictable traffic patterns, NGINX might be a good fit.
Exactly.
Okay.
But the world of applications is changing rapidly. Right? We're seeing more dynamic apps, especially with this move to microservices, where you have these small services that are constantly communicating with each other.
Right.
That's where Envoy's architecture really shines because it's built for that flexibility and real-time adaptation.
So it's almost like, I'm trying to think of a good analogy here, but it's almost like NGINX is like a well-oiled machine that's built for a very specific task.
Yeah.
But Envoy is more like this dynamic system that can kind of adapt to anything you throw at it.
Right.
I can definitely see how that would be, crucial in a microservices environment.
Absolutely, yeah. And a great example of that difference is how they handle configuration and management. So, NGINX relies on a static configuration file, usually named ngx.conf.
Okay.
So you make your changes to that file, and then you have to reload NGINX for those changes to take effect.
Okay, so that to me sounds like it could be a real pain in an environment where things are changing constantly, especially like a fast-paced, kind of development environment.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Imagine having to manually reboot your router every time a new device connected to your Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
That's essentially what NGINX would require in a dynamic microservices setup.
I'm already seeing, some downsides there. So how does Envoy handle this differently?
Yeah, so Envoy embraces dynamism from the ground up.
Okay.
So it uses these APIs like XDS, which stands for Extensible Discovery Service, which allow for real-time configuration updates.
Okay.
So no reloads, no restarts needed. It's constantly getting information and adjusting on the fly.
So it's constantly listening and reacting to changes in the environment.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. That seems like a huge advantage in a world where, things are constantly being updated and redeployed.
Mhm.
Could we get a little more specific about like what this actually looks like in practice?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's take a look at like a typical NGINX configuration block. It's
Okay.
pretty straightforward. Serverless and 80, dot location, proxy pass HTTP dot backend, proxy pass HTTP, a proxy pass HTTP.
Okay, so it's defining the server, the port it's listening on, and then what to do with incoming requests.
Exactly, yeah.
Makes sense. Now, what about an Envoy config?
Yeah, so here's a snippet, listeners.name.listener0.address.socket, address.address, 0nc0.sop, 0.port value 1000.filterchains.filters.name.envoy.filters.network.http, connection manager.typed config.type.type, type.googlelepus.com, and programming.extensions.filters.network.http, connection manager.v3.http, connection manager.step-prefix.ingress http.route config.name.localroute.virtualhost.name.backend.domains. .routes.match.prefix.route.cluster.service backend.
Okay, that's a bit more intense.
Yeah, it's a bit more verbose.
I can definitely see why people say Envoy has a steeper learning curve, but it sounds like you get a lot more control and flexibility in return.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Envoy's configuration might seem complex at first glance, but that's because it's built to handle like a ton of scenarios.
Okay, all right. So we've got the steady and efficient NGINX versus the dynamic and adaptable Envoy.
Right.
But at the end of the day, speed is king in in the app
Right.
world, right?
Right.
So how do they stack up in terms of like raw performance? I mean, I'm guessing this is where NGINX shines.
Yeah.
Just given its reputation for speed.
Yeah, you're not wrong. NGINX is known for its high throughput, especially when serving static content. It uses an event-driven architecture that's incredibly efficient. Think of it like a superhighway for data, optimized for moving large volumes very, very quickly.
So I'm building a website with, tons of images, downloads, where that speed is absolutely crucial. NGINX is still a strong contender.
Absolutely, yeah. Especially if your content is mostly static and you're serving it to a lot of users.
Okay.
But what about an app where speed means something a bit different?
Okay.
So think about an application with lots of services that are constantly talking to each other, like in a microservices architecture.
Yeah.
That's really where Envoy's strengths become clear.
Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me more. What kind of speed are we talking about in that context?
Yeah, so it's about the speed of communication between services.
Okay.
It's the efficiency of routing and that ability to adapt to changes in real time.
Got it.
So Envoy excels at handling these modern protocols like gRPC and HTTP2, which are really designed for that, that back and forth chatter of microservices.
Yeah.
It's like having a dedicated network of high-speed trains connecting your services, just making sure everything runs smoothly and efficiently.
So it's not just about like how fast can you deliver a single file. It's how efficiently can you manage this constant flow of communication between different parts of this, complex system.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, this is starting to make a lot more sense. I do have a question though. We're talking about speed, these different contexts, but what about the ability to actually see what's going on under the hood?
Right.
Like how do NGINX and Envoy compare when it comes to observability and troubleshooting?
Right.
Like if something goes wrong, can we actually see what's happening?
Yeah.
That's a really good point, It's one thing to have a system that's fast, but it's another thing to actually be able to like understand what's happening inside, especially when things go wrong or even just to optimize performance.
Yeah, absolutely. Observability is it's crucial, especially as applications become more complex and more distributed.
Right.
And this is where we see, a pretty big difference between NGINX and Envoy.
Okay, I'm ready to hear it. Lay it on me. What are the key differences there?
All right, so with NGINX, you get basic logging and some monitoring capabilities.
Okay.
It's kind of like having a basic dashboard, right?
Okay.
With like a speedometer and a fuel gauge.
Okay.
It tells you the essential stuff, but you might need to add some third-party tools if you want to get deeper insights.
So it's like having a car with a basic dashboard, but you need to like buy all these extra gauges and sensors if you really want to understand what's going on under the hood.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, Envoy takes a different approach.
Okay.
It's like having a state-of-the-art control panel with all the bells and whistles built right in.
Ooh. I like bells and whistles.
Yeah, so, it was designed with observability in mind from the ground up.
Okay, so what kind of bells and whistles are we talking about here?
All right, so for starters, Envoy has built-in support for detailed metrics.
Okay.
So it can integrate with tools like Prometheus and StatsD, giving you this really granular view of performance.
Oh, that's awesome. So you can like identify bottlenecks and stuff like that.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Anything else?
It gets even better. Envoy supports distributed tracing.
Okay.
So imagine being able to follow a request as it jumps between, all those different microservices.
You can see exactly where it goes, how long it takes at each step, if any errors occur along the way.
That's pretty powerful. It's like having a GPS tracker for each request, and you can see its entire journey through your system.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
Okay.
And on top of that, Envoy has structured logging, which makes analyzing those logs so much easier.
All right.
It's like having a perfectly organized library instead of, a random pile of books.
Okay, so I think Envoy is definitely winning in the observability department here.
Yeah.
Can we see what some of that tracing configuration looks like in action? I'm kind of curious to see how you would actually set that up.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's a snippet that shows how to configure Envoy to use Zipkin, which is a popular distributed tracing system.
Okay.
So here's what it looks like. http://name envoy.tracers.zipkin.typedconfig.com. envoy.com.typed.config.trace.v3.zipkinconfig.collector .zipkin.collectorendpoint.upiv2 spans.
Okay, so you're basically like specifying the tracing provider and how Envoy should connect to it. Seems pretty straightforward, but I imagine setting up distributed tracing in like a complex microservices environment can still be pretty challenging.
Yeah.
But let's shift gears for a moment and talk about another critical aspect. Security.
Right.
Especially with all this talk about distributed systems and microservices, security is definitely top of mind for me.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Security is paramount, and it's another area where NGINX and Envoy, they differ in their approaches.
Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me more.
All right, so NGINX has a commercial version called NGINX Plus.
Okay.
That offers some pretty advanced security features, including a web application firewall or WEF.
Okay, so if I'm like really concerned about web attacks and I need that, extra layer of protection, NGINX Plus is something worth considering.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay. But what about Envoy?
Yeah, so Envoy has some pretty strong built-in security features right out of the box.
Oh, okay. I'm interested to hear more about that. What are some of those features?
Yeah, so let's kind of break it down, feature by feature.
Okay.
So we have MTLS support, RBAC, JWT authentication, and WAY.
Okay.
So for Envoy MTLS support, it has native support, RBAC, yes. JWT authentication built in. And for WAY, it doesn't have it, but it requires integration.
Okay.
Now for NGINX, for MTLS support, it requires additional configuration. For RBAC, it does not have it. For JWT authentication, it requires plugins. And for WAY, it's available in NGIX Plus.
Okay, let's unpack that a little bit. What exactly is MTLS?
Yeah, so MTLS stands for Mutual TLS.
Okay.
It's like a super secure handshake between two parties, where they verify each other's identities, before exchanging any sensitive information.
Okay.
It's becoming, increasingly important in microservices environments where security is paramount.
And it sounds like Envoy has like native support for that, so it makes it easier to implement.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, that's a big win for security. What about RBAC? I hear that term thrown around a lot these days.
Yeah, so RBAC stands for Role-Based Access Control.
Okay.
It's a way to control who can access what based on their roles and permissions.
Okay.
Think of it as having different levels of security clearance, within your system.
So it's like having different keys that give you access to different parts of the building.
Right, exactly. And
Right.
It looks like Envoy supports that, while NGINX does not.
Got it.
So, Envoy gives you that more granular control over who can make changes to your configuration and access sensitive data.
Okay. What about JWT authentication? Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, so JWT stands for JSON Web Token.
Okay.
And it's a standard for securely transmitting information between parties as a JSON object.
Okay.
It's commonly used for API authentication and authorization.
So if I'm building APIs, which I'm guessing a lot of people using these proxies are, Envoy's built-in JWT support would be pretty valuable.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And then finally, Envoy doesn't have a built-in WAF like NGINX Plus, but you can integrate it with, external WAF solutions if you need that extra layer of protection against web attacks.
Okay, so it sounds like Envoy has the edge when it comes to like built-in security features.
Yeah.
But NGINX Plus offers that, commercial-grade WAF, if that's like a top priority. So it's all about kind of weighing the trade-offs, right?
Right.
But now I'm curious, like, how do these features actually play out in real-world scenarios?
Right.
Can you give me some examples of when you might choose one proxy over the other based on specific use cases?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's actually a perfect segue into the next part of our discussion.
Ooh, I like it when we plan those segues. All right, so let's dive into some real-world examples where each proxy really shines.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm ready for those real-world scenarios. This is where the rubber meets the road, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So give me some examples of when I would, definitively pick one proxy over the other.
Yeah, okay. So let's start with a classic use case where NGINX really shines, and that is serving a traditional web application with lots of static content.
Okay.
Think, images, CSS files, JavaScript. Imagine you have a website with tons of, high-res photos or, maybe a platform for downloading large files.
Okay, so a situation where you need to handle a lot of users and deliver that content quickly and efficiently.
Exactly, yeah. And NGINX is a proven performer in this space. It's incredibly efficient at serving that type of content, and it can distribute traffic across multiple servers
Okay.
to make sure your website stays responsive even under heavy load.
So it's like having a team of super fast delivery drivers, each optimized for, getting those packages to their destination as quickly as possible.
Right.
I'm guessing this isn't where Envoy shines.
You're right. While Envoy can handle this type of traffic, its real strength comes into play when we step into the world of microservices and service meshes.
Okay, back to the world of lots of little services talking to each other. Remind me why Envoy is such a good fit for that.
Yeah, so let's imagine you're building a complex application like, let's say, a ride-sharing platform.
Okay.
You have separate services for things like user management, ride requests, driver matching, payment processing, map integration. All these services need to communicate with each other constantly.
It sounds like a logistical nightmare keeping track of all those interactions.
Exactly. And that's where Envoy, often working within a service mesh, acts like an air traffic controller.
Okay.
It manages all the communication between these services, ensuring that requests are routed correctly, security policies are enforced, the system stays stable.
Okay, I'm starting to see the bigger picture here. Envoy isn't just delivering content, it's like orchestrating this complex symphony of interactions between all these different services.
That's a great analogy. And Envoy can do things like, dynamically route requests to the appropriate services, retry failed requests, collect detailed telemetry data, all without you having to write complex code within each service.
So it's like having a built-in safety net and a team of expert navigators for your microservices, making sure everything runs smoothly and efficiently, even when things go wrong.
Precisely.
Okay.
And because Envoy's configuration is dynamic, you can easily add new services, scale existing ones, even perform A/B testing without disrupting your live application.
Nice, nice. This is making me think about a project my team is working on.
Okay.
We're actually building an e-commerce platform with separate services for, things like product catalog, shopping cart, order processing, payments. It sounds like Envoy would be a great fit for managing all the communication between those services.
It definitely sounds like a perfect use case for Envoy. You could use it to define, really fine-grained control over how those services interact, enforce security policies to protect sensitive payment information, and gather detailed metrics on the performance of each service.
This is incredibly helpful. I'm starting to see how the choice between NGINX and Envoy really comes down to the architecture of your application and the specific challenges you're trying to solve.
Exactly. It's all about choosing the right tool for the job. But there's another layer to this decision, and that is the community and the ecosystem around each proxy.
You're right. The community can make a big difference when you're working with technology. It's like having a support network of people who have been there and done that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And in that regard, NGINX has a big advantage. It's been around for a long time and has a massive, well-established community.
Right.
You'll find tons of documentation, tutorials, blog posts, third-party modules to extend its functionality.
So it's like a bustling city with lots of,
Yeah.
resources and experienced guides to help you navigate.
Right.
What about Envoy?
Yeah, so Envoy's community is younger, but it's growing rapidly.
Right.
It's a very active and enthusiastic community, closely tied to the cloud native world, which is exploding right now.
So it's more like a rapidly growing startup, lots of energy and innovation,
Yeah.
but perhaps not as many established resources just yet.
That's a good way to think about it. Both communities have a lot to offer, and the choice often comes down to, personal preference and the specific support you're looking for.
Okay.
But, this conversation has got me thinking about something else, and that is the future.
Oh, yeah.
The tech landscape is constantly changing, so I'm wondering what the future holds for NGINX and Envoy. Any predictions?
That's a great question. It's one thing to understand the current state of these technologies, but it's even more fascinating to think about where they might go next.
Totally. And, one thing that's clear is that the world of application architecture is moving towards more distributed systems.
Right.
Whether it's serverless computing, edge computing, or, the continued rise of microservices.
And in that world, the role of a proxy server becomes even more critical, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Proxies are becoming the central nervous system of these distributed applications, managing traffic flow, enforcing security, providing that crucial observability, and both NGINX and Envoy are evolving to meet the demands of this new landscape.
So what are some specific trends you're seeing that might shape the future of these proxies?
Yeah, so one major trend is the increasing importance of security.
Right.
Cyber attacks are becoming more sophisticated, and organizations are looking for every advantage they can get to protect their systems and data. We're seeing both NGINX and Envoy step up their security game with features like, enhanced WAF capabilities, tighter integration with SIEM systems, and advanced support for MTLS encryption.
So it's like this constant arms race between the good guys and the bad guys, with proxies playing a key role on the front lines.
Yeah, exactly. Another trend is the push for even deeper observability.
Okay.
As systems become more complex and distributed, it's no longer enough to just monitor basic metrics.
Right.
We need tools that provide a truly holistic view of system behavior, allowing us to trace requests across service boundaries, identify bottlenecks, and really optimize performance.
And it sounds like both NGINX and Envoy are, rising to that challenge. It's fascinating to see how these technologies are evolving to keep pace with the ever-changing demands of, modern software development.
Yeah, I agree. It's an exciting time to be working with these technologies. And while it's impossible to predict the future with certainty, one thing is clear. Both NGINX and Envoy are likely to remain key players in the world of application delivery and security for years to come.
This has been an incredible deep dive.
Yeah.
We've covered so much ground. The history, the architecture, the strengths, the weaknesses, the use cases, the communities, and even the future of these amazing technologies.
It's been a real pleasure exploring this topic with you, and I hope our listeners have walked away with, a deeper understanding of what makes these proxies tick, how they differ, and how they can choose the right one for their needs.
I couldn't agree more. And as always, we encourage our listeners to continue exploring these technologies, experimenting with them, and, sharing their experiences.
Absolutely. The world of technology is constantly evolving, and the best way to stay ahead of the curve is to, stay curious, stay engaged, and never stop learning.
That's fantastic advice. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of proxy servers. Until next time, keep exploring and keep innovating.